right head on. But the first thing that's coming to my mind as you ask the question is learning to practice self-compassion for these very human experiences, so, and just even labeling it that way is, oh, this is a human experience is so compassionate in and of itself, right? So saying like, oh, before this interview or before I was getting so anxious. And if we can just meet that experience and say, yeah, that makes sense. It's okay. It makes sense that I would feel anxious sometimes. I'm human, and that's okay. This feeling is totally okay for me. It doesn't mean anything more than the fact that this experience is here for me now. I don't have to make more of it than I need to, and I'm okay feeling that. So I think it's like the self-compassion to name it, to recognize that it's something that we all experience, even imposter syndrome. I mean, if you look at the studies and the research on that, so many people could identify with that feeling. So if we're able to meet it and just say, okay, this is here for me now. And I don't even need to like get so into it. Like, why is this here? Or what? It's more just like, just noting it, being okay with it. We can offer some reassurance to ourselves, like it'll pass, or kind of, it's a bummer that I feel this way, but I can still do what I need to do with the feeling. My job is not to like only do the things I want to do if I'm feeling amazing,
Because that's a big thing I found was I wasn't angry. I wasn't upset. I wasn't obsessed. I was just feeling that emotion. And to, like you're saying, to stop and actually identify it and watch it just pass. And once you
Yeah,
realize that you're not your brain, you're not the thoughts, you're the person observing the thoughts, it's just like
right,
a program throwing stuff out. So,
right.
but what happens if we've made mistakes in the past? I've had guys
Mhm,
write to me because after the Me Too movement, they were worried
mhm,
that they had maybe offended or took advantage of a girl, or they had done something
mhm,
stupid, maybe not
mhm,
even stuff that was real, but they
mhm,
had perceived these things. Or people, I spoke to David Hayes, who
mhm,
works in penal sort of justice reform,
mhm,
and he was
mhm.
saying he works with prisoners who are told, you're scum. You're always going to be a number. You're never going to change. You're
Oh,
never going to be.
yeah,
And he's saying that they then identify as criminals. So what's the point of trying? They'll just go
right.
back in and out. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. How do
Yeah,
we move on from a mistake or reset, recalibrate, and refocus?
yeah, yeah. I think like just sort of building off of what we were saying just before about the self-compassion piece.
Mhm.
We're all going to make mistakes. And sometimes like, the mistakes are to varying degrees of infraction, on whatever we've done, but we're all going to make mistakes, and meeting ourselves with self-compassion is, I think, a step towards our own healing and making change, right? So if I can say, oh, I just, talked to that person that way, and or I yelled at my spouse, or, that doesn't feel great. If we go down the rabbit hole of like, oh, what's wrong with me? I'm such a bad person. We're just digging ourselves deeper, and we're not actually
Mhm.
moving towards making change.
I mean, Steve Cam, who runs Nerd Fitness, he has this amazing article about Berserker, that kind of Viking warrior rage. And he said, you
Mhm.
just need that 20 seconds of rage to do the confidence. And
Mm.
he applies it that, if you're nervous, pretend you're a
Mhm.
Berserker and get that 20 seconds of rage and
Mhm.
give the confidence to
Mhm.
yourself.
Mhm.
If we do find that in ourselves, how do we find that confidence to come and speak to a therapist and say, I am struggling, or speak to a doctor, or like a mental health charity? How do we
Mhm.
how do we admit to it? But how do we give you the areas, the symptoms, the explanation that you need to start helping us? How do we work best with a therapist in that sense?
You mean how do we reach out? Like how can we get over fears that we have of reaching out?
Yeah, I mean, is there a way that, like, say, if somebody just now goes, I don't know how I could tell somebody that I am having thoughts about this, or
Uh,
I'm depressed.